First of all, I'd like to gratefully acknowledge the traditional territory of the Fort William First Nation, and thank you very much for inviting me to come to Thunder Bay. I grew up in Winnipeg, so not that far away. I actually came here to ski when I was a little person. It was like a million years ago. And I actually know that Fort William and Port Arthur used to be what you were called. So I really appreciate, and I've driven from British Columbia to Toronto and seen how bloody big this province is. It's a long way. And you're sort of right in sconce, and you've got that great Terry Fox statue of that great hometown boy of ours out in BC who did an amazing job bringing this country together. So today I want to talk a little bit about what physical literacy is. How many people know what it is or have heard the term? Put your hand up. Okay, not bad. Physical literacy is something that it's amazing in this day and age. We actually have to program it. We have to structure it. When you were all kids, take a moment back, some a little older, some a little younger, did you run out of the house in the morning and come back at the end of the day? Is that what you did? Yes. Do our kids do that today? No. And guess what? We've all caused that. We have to own it as a collective group. Maybe not you directly with your own kids, but this is our watch. We all let this happen on our watch. 24-hour news, Amber Alert has brought this fear into our thinking that Johnny or Janie is going to be abducted, that's going, and is going to be hurt in some way. So let's talk a little bit about the need for this. Everybody gets after this. Everybody gets after this baby right here. More power in this thing than the computer that put the man on the moon, right? An amazing tool. This is an outcome. This is not a process. We have taken 20 plus years to defrag the system and make it okay for our kids to be sedentary. We have done this. And this is not a physiological issue. This is a behavioral issue. And so we need to change behavior. Parents' behavior, and I'm really looking forward to Reed's talk, no pressure Reed, no pressure, after mine, to talk more specifically about some things. But one of the things that fascinates me is how at different points of the system, it is adults that have changed the circumstance for kids. So when kids are young, they can't roam very far from the house. Got to stay in the yard, maybe if you live in a cul-de-sac. But beyond that, when you were young, how far were you roaming from your house? Pretty far, especially in more rural communities, right? You were getting out there. You look at the sports system. Where are the people that are bad apples, and who are they? They're adults. Most of the kids are fine. Actually, I remember playing as a kid, and we'd be out in the park and be a group of kids. You break into two teams, you play a game. If it wasn't balanced, it wasn't fair, you'd stop, swap a few kids, move on. Could you imagine that happening in a sports setting today? Parents would lose their shit. They couldn't handle it, right? Like it is an interesting time. We have a different circumstance. And because of that different circumstance, things like this have taken up a lot of the gap, a lot of the space. So when kids couldn't go outside and play, what were they doing? Well, they were watching TV, and then when the internet came along, they started being on the internet. So we have to own this. We have to look at the circumstance today and go, okay, guess what? Unstructured play, that ability to just spontaneously go and do my own thing and not have somebody to tell me what to do and tell me if I'm doing it wrong. Okay, that's the other thing. As adults, we're really judgy. We've got to lose judgy. Kids need to have that ability to go out and make mistakes, to be themselves. So it's really important that we do that. We build a lot of these fixed environments, a lot of these fixed structures. The pack of the parents in the school raise a bunch of money and they'll build this great exercise structure. It's good for 2 weeks and then nobody's on it anymore, right? The biggest, who's in early childcare here? So fixed parts, right? That whole ability to be flexible, change things. So you're not fixed in one, loose parts, sorry, not fixed parts. So this whole ability to change things. Walking to school. It used to be a rite of passage. It was awesome. We'd do so many things with our friends on the way. It doesn't happen anymore. From a physiological standpoint, they've actually done some research around this. This little guy right here will lose about 2,000 steps a day in not walking to and from school. And that would equate over a school year to about, at 100 calories a day, about 4 or 5 pounds. So you can see just from the straight physiology, that's a challenge. But probably more importantly, think of all the decisions they get to make to and from school. We've taken those opportunities for our kids to make decisions away from them. And why do we have the helicopter parent? Because our kids can't make their own decisions. I mean, there's a lot of things that sort of circulate around. And of course, you know, come home when the street lights come on. You'd probably get called by child services if that happened. So it's a different place. It's a different environment that we live in. So, and what's happening because of that? Well, there's lots of things that are happening that are very worrisome. This is what they call a match pair study. The top row is what we call inactive people, gamers. They do less than 3,000 steps a day. And the bottom row are active people. They do over 15,000 steps a day. Okay, just to give you an idea. They're matched by gender and age. And I don't think you need to be a radiologist to figure out that there might be a bit of a problem there. What do you see in that top row? What is the most telling thing? This is a cross-section of the femur, the long bone in the leg. What do you see in that top row that's concerning? These are 21-year-old people. That's pretty thin, isn't it? So you need 2 things for good bone. Good shape and good density. Okay? And so what's happening here is that you have people who are not developing good, strong bone. And the real sad part of this whole story is you can't change this. When the astronauts went up to space for the very first time, when they came back, we discovered that their bone loss was irreparable. Now when they go up to space, they exercise for 2.5 hours a day to make sure that does not happen. So no amount of nutrition, no amount of exercise changes that. So you basically have 21-year-old people with really old bone. You think osteoporosis is bad now? 30 and the thing is, it's really interesting. This is not happening in an obese person. This is happening in a person that doesn't necessarily look unhealthy. It's very insidious what's going on right now. This is quite scary when you think about it. This is a pretty interesting diagram of what types of diseases are largely driven by physical inactivity. There's way too many diseases there. Way too many. And probably really telling with today's situation, especially when we talk about mental health, when we talk about psychological disorders, and there's a lot of focus in high schools today around mental health and the mental health of our young people and our youth. But when you have mental health issues, it actually exacerbates the physical issues and makes it even worse. So these are things that are directly related to physical inactivity. And as an example, type 2 diabetes, I don't think I have to tell you, is totally preventable. You are not born with type 2 diabetes. You acquire it because of your lifestyle. So there's a number of things that are really of concern. So where do we spend our money? Where do we prioritize our things as a society? How do we equate value? So in Canada, we spend approximately $5 billion per million people. 35 million people in Canada, do the math. It's a fair amount of money. But let's be realistic here. This is not health care, this is sick care. We're basically fixing people who are broken. And to be honest with you, that is why our healthcare system was created. It was created for catastrophic injury so it wouldn't bankrupt you. It's evolved to a bunch of different things and an expectation in our society that it should fix anything that happens to us. When it comes to public health and prevention, a very, very, very small amount of that $5 billion is actually put to that particular issue. And it's a bit of a problem. Education and literacy. Our school system, about half that amount spent there. Now, why do I identify education and literacy in there? Well, I do that because a lot of people think that a lot of the movement issues, a lot of the inactivity issues can be solved by the school. The school can fix it. They've got the kids all day. No problem. How many teachers here? Put your hand up. Yeah. How many times have you heard that? It's a problem. Schools are busy. They've got lots of things to do. Yes, they have a role. And we're going to hopefully talk about that more today. But they are not the solution. The primary focus in education today is numeracy and literacy. That is the primary focus. That is what's resourced the most. And that doesn't mean you don't come across a great teacher who who really focuses on arts and drama or physical education or some other subject. The system itself, numeracy, literacy. And by the way, we are one of the most literate countries in the world. Okay, we'll talk about that again. So when it comes to sport, tourism, recreation, and healthy living, we now move from a B to an M. And I believe that's 3 zeros. And this is where our prevention is. Health is driven in the community by a lot of different groups, by public health, by lots of non-for-profits, by recreation departments, by schools. That's the new health. If we're going to become healthy, that's where it needs to be driven from, because healthcare is not making us healthier. It's not. Healthcare is fixing a whole bunch of broken people, and that's part of the challenge. Our friend Hippocrates, many thousands of years ago, had an interesting perspective. The function of protecting and developing health must rank even above that of restoring it when impaired. I think we got it backwards. So how do we start to turn that ship a bit? We're not going to change it 100%, but how do we start to make that shift? We do know, the good news is that when you do move, a lot of really good things happen. And for those people that say, well, where's the research? There's a ton of research around this. This is not an argument. This is not a discussion. This is a fact. When you move, a whole bunch of really good things happen to our bodies. A lot of really great things. And it's not just physical. I was actually at a conference in West Vancouver School District at the end of the school year this year, and a grade 9 teacher had 4 grade 9 students. They were talking about a mental health project they'd done, and it was, really engaging. And the teacher was describing the project, then went to each of the students, and they talked about their portion of the project, which was great. And then she asked each of the students, so for your mental health, what is your strategy? To a person, each kid had a physical strategy for their mental health. I go for a run. I go and do this activity with my friends. It was tremendously telling that the kids were telling us what works for them. Yet we don't provide near enough opportunities for them to be engaged around that. So what is physical literacy? Well, here's the definition. There'll be a quiz on this at the end of the day, by the way, so be ready. It's really broken down into a couple of pieces. And April started talking, gave a few of the hints at the beginning. It's about building that level of competence, some people call it ability, to have some confidence to move on a more regular basis and be motivated to move on a more regular basis and understand why that's important so that you value it at the end of the day. Unfortunately, for many of our young people, and actually, if we look at the whole span of our population, even many older people, so I'm going to take a 65-year-old retiring baby boomer female who maybe didn't have a very positive movement experience when they were young, because culturally when they were young, women were not really girls, and women were not really as engaged in phys ed and sport. Their opportunities weren't there like they are today. So how does a 65-year-old woman who's retiring, what's her entry point into activity in the community look like? What does it look like in what you do if you work with this type of population? Is it easy for them to get started on something? They don't know how to move at all. What does that look like? Right? So these are the sort of things we need to think about. To support the definition, a number of years ago, a consensus statement was created. This was a cross-sectoral consensus statement done nationally and focused on 4 main areas. A lot of us think of the physical area, the fundamental, you've heard FMS, fundamental movement skills, really important component, really important concept, but it's just part of the plot. It's just part of it. It's important for us to be physical, absolutely. But we also need to be, and unfortunately you can't quite see it, it's effective is the top category, your effective domain. And that domain involves your level of self-confidence. How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about your ability to move? Right? What does that look like? Cognitive talks about your knowledge and understanding, my knowing why this is important. Why do I do it? And then the fourth one, behavioral, is really an outcome of the first 3. If we do the first 3, do we change behavior? Do we modify what's going on for people? So at the end of the day, it gets down to what are the opportunities we can create for people, regardless of whether they're children, youth. A real part of the population I worry about is mothers who basically give up their own health to raise their children. You see a whole bunch of mums who kind of throw, and I actually adopted triathlon in my later life because you know what, it's age group. You can compete against all the rest of the old duffers. It's awesome. But interestingly enough, in triathlon, age 35 to 50 or 45, huge number of men. Because, they can get out of the house and go and do triathlon. You don't see a big wave of women coming till 45 because they've had to raise the kids, right? It's an interesting dynamic in our population. But a lot of women give up their own health for their kids. So what are we doing as a community to address that? Okay, so we'll talk more about that later today. And then, or older adults who are the biggest burden on our healthcare system, how do we improve their quality of life? How do we create a level of independence so they can move, so they can feel confident to be out there and maybe if they have to take the bus to go somewhere? Go out and walk in the snow and ice. Because what happens to most seniors in the winter? They don't want to leave the house, do they? Because what happens when you fall when you're old? 20% of people who go in with a broken hip do not come out. And it's not a good thing. So to give you a little diagram, because we like to do things in diagrams every now and again, physical literacy really is about the development of movement skills. Lots of different skills. And with that, building some confidence to participate. And when you do have that higher level of confidence, because you have some skills, you can hopefully have a higher level of enjoyment moving on. And you cycle through that. You get into a cycle that works for you. When we talk about sport and quality sport, it needs to be safe and inclusive. And it needs to be well run. I don't know how many times I've heard, well, they're volunteers as an excuse for something not being well run. I'm sorry, that's not an excuse. It's not good enough. Things can still be, I've seen amazing, amazing things done by volunteers. We should not settle for the idea that something can't be well run because it's volunteer driven. Unappropriate, doesn't work for me. Developmentally appropriate. So part of the challenge in the sports system today is we want everybody to be so good at 8 or 9. We're all in a hurry. Kids need to, Johnny's a great hockey player at 9. He's going to be in the NHL. You seen the stats on that? Doesn't work that way. Interestingly enough, the research shows that most of our high-performance athletes are late developers. They're not early developers. And what do we do with most of our late developers? Because most of our late developers are not that good when they're young. They're not as good. What do we typically do them in the sports system? We make it harder on them. We don't give them any priority treatment. We actually try and weed them out. Because he's not good enough to play with my son. Right? It's interesting. Parents again. Adults. So when we talk about physical literacy, how does that line up with literacy and numeracy? Well, very, 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 very closely. Because just like numeracy and literacy, you have to learn how to move. So we know very clearly that with literacy, You learned your ABCs and words, you form sentences, you can write paragraphs, and from there you want to develop a robust vocabulary, lots of words. Literacy is such a part of our society that what do we do with our kids before they go to bed every night? We read to them. That is ingrained in our society as a fundamental thing that we do. And because of that, we've become one of the most literate countries in the world. Well done. In the 60s, numeracy started to get a little bit more popular. Engineering, information technology has really changed things a lot. So learning your 1, 2, 3s, your fractions and equations, okay, this opens a lot of doors for people. Now, I think you would all agree, either in your own personal experience or what you've seen, is that you know there's some kids who have an easier time or a harder time with either literacy or numeracy. So those kids who pick it up easy, it's all good. What do the other kids have to do? Homework. They have to work harder. So they go home and do lots of homework around it. So their ability to learn is, you know, it's there. How quickly they learn is the differentiating factor between them. It's no different with movement. You have to learn how to move. Now, that doesn't mean that as a kid, if I show you how to move and do this one thing, that you can't pick that up and go and do it right away. You've seen those kids. They see it once, they got it, they're gone. And you see the other kids that need 4 or 5 or 10 tries before they get it. Right? It's no different pedagogically from these other subjects, yet we treat phys ed way differently. So I'm hoping that we can have a bit of discussion, maybe a sidebar with the teachers around that. That's Mark's baby. I'll let him talk about that in his session today. So movement is a learned skill. And what we've done more than anything in our system is we've reduced the number of opportunities to move. And because of that, we have a less sophisticated, less learned group of movers. And that doesn't lead to very good long-term outcomes. Do you think that if you are a or less confident mover, that you will move more often? More likely than not. More likely not. And so conversely, if we actually develop a good level of confidence when we're young, we learn how to do a number of different things, do you think that opens up a lot of doors for you and potentially leads to a more active life? Maybe? So how can we create, you think about in your own space and what you do, what can you do to help people develop a greater level of competence, and through that a greater level of confidence to be motivated to move more often? What can you do? So that we'll come back to that today. So how do we get it on equal footing? How do we create this balance in what's going on? Okay? In some settings, we're trying to really make this statement. We want to try and see, oh, okay, well, we know that the decision makers, school boards, they aren't there yet, not even close. But we're seeing some interesting movement happening in communities in Ontario. And it's happening at the community level. I personally work on a project in Sudbury, in Hamilton, in Aurora, that are all focused around building physical literacy in the community. Funded by Trillium, and that's one of the wonderful things you guys have in this province. Trillium's a marvelous thing. $750,000 for 3 years in Aurora. You could do a lot of things with $750,000. This happens every year. So at the end of the day, I'm going to have some conversations with April and with Marianne and so on and so forth, and we're going to talk about how can we mobilize the community and maybe make a Trillium application. Why can't we do that, right? Because things happen at the community level. Recreation, education, health, sport can work together. They actually can. And we see it happening right now. So when we talk about fundamental movement skills, okay, that seems like a pretty general term. What are you talking about? It's really 3 main categories of fundamental movement skills. Body control skills, so typically balance is the one we tend to focus on the most. Locomotor skills, this is the group that we probably spend the most time doing if we do any of them. And then object manipulation or object control skills. So using your limbs, using your head to send or catch or strike something with your body. Now, it's really important to understand that a lot of these skills, and as they are projected right now, are very sporty based. But there's a lot of people that aren't comfortable in that sporty space. Totally get that. So we need to be thinking more broadly about lots of other skills, lots of other movement opportunities for people. Okay, it's not just about playing soccer or just about playing basketball. That is one way that you can express movement for yourself, is playing sport or playing a game. Because all that is, at the end of the day, and don't tell kids this, it's movement homework. That's what it is. When they play games at recess or after school or at lunch, that's just movement homework. And how do we create a more quality movement homework opportunity for our kids? So let's talk about this as a cycle. So we know, in the definition, we talked about the idea that competence is really important. So let's be more specific, we'll call it movement competence. If we develop that level of movement competence, don't you wish you were that bendy, by the way? For all those, namaste, for all you yoga people, okay? Movement competence, if we have a level of that, we can hopefully psychologically get to a level of confidence that I feel, I can try that. I can do this, so maybe I'll try that. Yeah, okay. And if you can do things and you have a little bit higher level of confidence, does that motivate you to do it more often? Well, one of the critical things that's important about any type of movement experience is it needs to be enjoyable. It needs to be fun. 2 reasons why kids get involved in sport: fun and friends. And why do they leave sport? It's no longer any fun and my friends are gone. And guess who creates that atmosphere? So you're seeing my theme popping up again, right? It's the adults. It is the adults that do that. So we need to create those types of opportunities that create enjoyment. And one of the key things that's important about physical activity and sport in particular is social connection. This is not social connection. This is social connection. Looking at somebody, looking in their eyes. Because I'll tell you right now, the crap they say on this, they would never do like this. They would never do that. And this is one of the things that this has changed, right? A lot of our kids are emboldened to say a lot of really mean things and stupid things through this medium. So we need to create opportunities where they have to look each other in the eye and be more connected. Because that's going to start to bring that down a bit. It's going to start to change that a bit as we move along. Now, if we have this cycle moving along, hopefully, with increased competence and confidence, and I'm more motivated to do things more often, I'm going to participate more often. And if I participate more often, can I have an effect on that disease graph? On that really, really big disease graph? And if I get the cycle working properly, can I cycle in and out a number of times in lots of different places and in different phases of my life? So I think you see the opportunity in early childcare, in elementary school, and even in high school. If we lay a good foundation, we can do some good work here for the rest of their pathway. Now, that doesn't mean you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Adults can get engaged, older adults can get engaged. But the work that we do foundationally at the beginning is really critical. It's really important. Okay? And one of the things that really jazzes me a lot is the intergenerational opportunity between grandparents and grandkids. Really cool. So whether it could be as simple as reading and being together and socially connecting, and maybe even moving together, because they both benefit from it in a big way. Okay? So most of our movement is on the land. We move ourselves around. When we're doing activity, it may be on a gym floor, it may be on a soccer field, it may be on grass, it could be on any number of surfaces, but most of our movement is done on the ground. It is. Now, we know that the water is important, because what happens if you don't have good skills in the water? You die. It's pretty straightforward, right? You drown. We do a big project in the Caribbean. We work with 5, 6 different countries in the Caribbean. For those of you who've been down to the Caribbean, it's a pretty lovely place. One of my favorite places is the British Virgin Islands. Interestingly enough, some of these places, which are islands and surrounded by water, up to 90% of the people can't swim. It's a fascinating cultural thing that's happened in those countries. They'll go sit in the water, they'll go stand in the water, but they can't swim. Very interesting. In Canada, we have lots of water. And interestingly enough, if you go across communities across the country over the last 30 to 40 years, you see learn to swim programs, all grade 3s, all grade 5s, all grade 6s, whatever. And it cycles in, it cycles out. Depends who's in charge, right? We need to swim. We don't need to swim. We need to swim. We don't need to swim. We don't, it's like all this different public policy stuff that changes. Do you think it's important as a population that we should all learn how to swim? Yes or no? Yes? Yeah, it's good public safety. It's a smart thing to do. And so the beauty of it is, not dissimilar to the ground, you have to learn how to move in the water. And once you learn how to move in the water, you have a higher level of confidence to go back in the water. And you will do it more often because of that. The ice and snow, big part of our Canadian culture. Where I live, not so much. Okay? In Thunder Bay, you guys have a lot of ice and snow. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of older people really hesitant to get out on the ice and snow because again, they're going to fall. Potentially. Now, we actually have a sport in our country, which is strongly embedded culturally in our country, which actually promotes people, especially older people, because this sport is largely older people, to go and get on the ice. What sport is that? Yeah, and we actually give you this slippery thing to put on one of your feet to make it even more slippery. Do you think that makes sense? I think it's actually injury prevention for older adults because you're teaching them how to slide on ice. So curling saves lives. How's that sound? Is that our new motto? We're going to make a shirt up about that, okay? So snow and ice should not be a barrier for people. When you're thinking, if you work in an older population environment, how do we actually get people engaged around ice and snow in such a way that it builds their confidence? A lot of things that happen, we're really stressed about liability. So, there's a piece of ice in the schoolyard. What do? They put a cone on it, so you stay off it. Okay. Is that a good thing, or what? Do we want our kids to actually learn how to slide on this stuff and be more confident on it? Be a good thing, but we're so risk adverse. We're worried somebody's going to fall and bonk their head or hurt themselves in some way. So we need to look at these things and go, okay, from a public policy standpoint, can we look at these things differently? We can't rubberize the whole world. We can't bark mulch the whole world, right? Like we need to build, and how many of you have heard of risky play? Put your hand up. Interesting term. Sometimes it makes people a little concerned when you say risky play. But the importance of that is, and April actually mentioned it, is when parents are around, what are they doing with their kids? In many cases, they're holding them back. Oh, don't climb too high. Oh, don't do that, you're going to hurt yourself. Right? How do we create that increased boundary for parents to let their kids explore a little bit more? Go out there and challenge themselves a bit more. It's a challenge. It really is. I don't necessarily have the answer, but I think we need to be looking at it and going, okay. Some people get to play in the air. Pretty cool place. And that could be as cool as freestyle skiing, where they literally go off this jump and they're 45 feet in the air. I was actually I was the director of medical for the World Freestyle Ski Championships in Whistler in 2001, and all I did was stand beside the jump and fret for 3 days, waiting for somebody to land on their head. They didn't. One guy landed on his face. It wasn't too bad, but the air is a pretty cool place. In a more simple type situation, you actually spend time in the air in soccer. Do you think you need to know how to move your body in the air when you head a ball? Absolutely. If you're a goalie, do you think you need to be able to move your body in the air? You absolutely do. So there's different experiences. We spend too much time there and not enough time here, to the point that we now have a thing called outdoor deficit disorder. It's a thing. Use the Google. You'll find it. Outdoor deficit disorder. And interestingly enough, and maybe not so much in Thunder Bay, a little bit more rurally based. I'm not saying, you're in the middle of nowhere, but you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. Kids in this type of environment versus downtown Vancouver or downtown Toronto, are probably going to see green space, I hope, a little bit more. But think about it. In 30 or 40 years, they're the stewards of that green space. If they don't value it, what's it going to look like? Right? So just food for thought more than anything else. So it's important we give them multiple environments to be engaged in. And so I'm just going to throw an opportunity around this. So to go skating or to go swimming, a recreation department and a school could get together to make that happen. They absolutely could. And it shouldn't be dependent on the principal and the recreation director because it should be part of your system. It should happen regardless. But just because Bob and Joe or Jane know each other and they make that happen, that's a great thing, but it shouldn't be the way the system works. We talk about all the barriers. How do we create the opportunities? Okay, recreation departments for the most part during the day, lots of opportunity to go out there and play. It's not as busy during the day. So how do we actually get sectors to work together, think together, work together? We'll talk more about this later. When we're talking about our little people, for you early child care people, how many early child care people? A few back here, there we go. So this is basically a graph diagram that depicts when skills start to get established. So going down the vertical axis here, you have locomotor skills, you have some sending and receiving skills. Okay, the blue means the body is not mature enough yet to start to develop the skill. I'm sure all of you have met people who talk about how quickly they can get their kids walking. And I think it's, wow, that's amazing. It's not about how quick they learn how to walk. Really, it isn't. It's not a race. Green is a normal onset of the skill. Yellow is the best time to teach or practice. Orange is intervention needs to start happening. And what's happening for many kids, depending on their parents and depending on the opportunities that are presented to them, especially when they're young, is we have too many kids that are moving into orange. And coming into school, how many JKK grade 1 teachers here? Any? None? You're all, okay, you guys? So you guys seeing a real mixed bag of kids' movement skills coming into your class every year? Like a wide array? Are you seeing more who can move reasonably well or less? Less. Anecdotal. We have anecdotal evidence over here. If mom and dad are not prone to move, Johnny or Janie are usually not getting as many movement experiences. So how do we create that education opportunity for parents and have the system, the community, the village, create those opportunities for people as they move along? Okay, how do we actually make that happen? So people think, okay, physical literacy. So there's physical literacy, there's physical activity, there's physical fitness. How are they different? How are they alike? So we've talked a little bit about physical literacy. I think you would agree that it's more than just the physical, right? There are other components that are involved, psychological components, emotional, social components, with physical and built up of activities, lots of different activities. Physical, you need to do physical activity, and I'll use that as an all-encompassing term to include sport. You need to do physical activity, quality physical activity, to develop physical literacy. Okay? That's just part of it. Because like literacy, okay, you have to learn how to read and write to become more literate. You have to do physical activity, quality physical activity, to develop physical literacy. See the connection? Now, we know when we do physical activity, one of the outcomes is increased physical fitness. You actually have to do, and again, physical activity is an all-encompassing term. It includes exercise as well, okay? That's how we become more fit. We move more. We do more activity. We become more physically fit. So physical literacy is what we want to develop. We have to do physical activity. And as an outcome of doing physical activity, you get fitter. You develop a level of physical fitness. A lot of people have connected physical fitness to exercise, and physical fitness is exercise. That's probably a little generalizing. It is more broad than that. But at the end of the day, we want to build durability. If we have more durable people, they're going to be able to survive in their environment, have a higher quality of life. Other people use the term resilience. Okay? Whatever you're comfortable with. But they are all interconnected. And we know that if we actually have a reasonable level of physical literacy and a reasonable level of physical fitness, we increase durability. And what we want to do is we want to make our kids into superheroes. That's what we want for them. We want to create that opportunity for them to build their own level of durability. And that they have the capability to manage this for their life. And that's what developing physical literacy is about. And that's why it's important. Is that we have an opportunity to not do more, but do what we're currently doing differently. And that's what I'm posing to you today. Is it, if you come out of today with any sort of different thinking or anything else, is that this is not just more to pile on you. Okay? This is about looking at the way you currently do things and looking at doing things a little bit differently. How can I do that? Okay? So everybody get up. Stand up. Okay, we're going to boldly go here. Oh, and I'm totally screwing up the camera. Okay, so we're going to be very orderly. I need you two people right there. Come here. Stand right here. Side by each. Shoulder to shoulder. There we go. Everybody line up behind them in pairs. We're going to make this work in this room, so you're going to have to be really on your toes. Okay, I'm going to move all the objects that could potentially get hit as we move around. They're going to move in an oval around the room. They're going to come around this way. They're going to come through here. They're going to go through here, and they're going to recreate that, okay? Okay, everyone. So, people on the front, you're going to make a bit of a left-hand turn. You're going to come along. You're going to go right in front. You're going to thread the needle. Okay, you're good with that? You're only too wide. You can do that. You're going to go around the corner, down in front of the tables there, and that's our oval. We got our oval. We're good with that? What you're going to do is you're just going to jog slowly together. Okay? Just jog slowly together, following each other. Go. Keep your heads up. You got to watch your environment. Okay, stop. You've managed to achieve level 1. Well done. Okay. Okay, really? Yeah, set the bar. Yeah, says the big guy at the back. Okay, so now we're going to make it more interesting. So we're going to practice while we're standing still. So people on the right will move. You're going to switch sides, are going to move in the front. People on the left are going to move in the back. So what I mean by that is you're standing beside somebody right now, and you're going to switch positions. So you're going to move over there, and you're going to move over there. You go in the front, you go in the back. Let's practice that. Switch. Switch.
Again, back?
Yeah. No, Just when you got to go the same way every time, right? Because you know what happens when you don't do that. Okay, so we got it now. Everybody on the right goes in the front. Everybody in the back goes on the back. Or left. Okay, go. No. Move now. Move. Start moving. Jog. Jog. I didn't say switch. 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 Now take your inside palms and keep moving. Put your palms up together. Palms together. Switch. 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 Okay, palms down, shoulders leaning into each other. Keep moving. Come on, keep moving. Switch. 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 Stop. Let's tighten our line up. Tighten our line up. Come on. Get our line. No, you can't keep moving in a circle. That's not tightening our line up. You guys stay where you are. You're the new front of the line. You guys move around. Tighten it up. Okay. Yeah, if you kept moving around a circle, that defeats our purpose. Okay? Okay. Very good. Very good. Now you can give yourself a bit of a hand, but not too much. Okay. We don't want to get overly gratified here. Okay. Now you've done it forwards. You know what that means next. Okay. So just a hint, staying in one spot and doing this is not moving backwards. This is moving backwards, okay? Just letting you know, because a lot of people do this and they think they're moving backwards, okay? You gotta move. You guys are now the leads. Moving back, don't turn around. Go, start moving. Switch. Switch. Keep moving. You got to keep moving. Switch. 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 Shoulders together. Shoulders together. Keep moving. Keep moving. Okay, stop. Now you give yourself a hand. Good job. Good job. Come in for 1 sec. Come in for 1 sec. Okay, come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come. Okay, so I have 4 questions for you. Did you need to be aware of your body in space and time to do that? Did you need to select a specific skill at a specific time to make that happen? Did you need to sequence a bunch of skills together to make that happen? Did you need to modify things when shit hit the fan? Yeah? When you're doing activity, you want to be thinking about creating those 4 circumstances at any one given time. What you just did here was, what was the number one thing you heard other than me saying switch? You're a plant. Yeah. Well, look at the height difference. It's a bit ridiculous. Was that like on purpose or what? Okay, so a lot of people think about, oh, skill building's no fun. Kids aren't going to enjoy it and everything else. Well, guess what? You can. That was one simple thing. There's like 1,000 of those different things you can do. It's important to understand that you can create opportunities where things are fun, yet at the same time, they're still skill building. What has happened today is we've dumbed down physical activity so that, kilometer club, which is great, going out and jogging, there's no movement skill developed, really, at the end of the day. Okay? How do we actually create purposeful, diverse movement for kids every day? That's our goal. Okay? Great. Sit down. Good job. And you need to get up anyways. Your eyelids are starting to drop. Okay, we're almost there. So just a little snapshot. This is the Sport for Life rectangle. How many have seen this before? A few of you? Okay. This was created, its original version was created in 2004. It was adopted by the federal ministers in 2005. All of our nationally funded sport organizations have adopted their own model built around this, where we actually focus on stage-based development versus age-based development. Now again, I'll say, what do I mean by that? What I mean is, how many of you have seen 9-year-olds that are this tall and 9-year-olds that are this tall? Yeah. How do they play with each other in sport? Yeah. So weight-based sports like judo and karate and wrestling, they actually have figured out that it makes sense to actually get people of appropriate size to do things together. While lacrosse, hockey, basketball, if you're a 9-year-old, you play against all the other 9-year-olds, right? So this system is actually based on stages of development, wherever you're at. Now, I actually own a December 26th boy, okay? He was born at the end of the year. How many have ever seen the statistics around junior hockey and Canada? So Reed knows exactly where I'm going with this. Is if you're born, actually in Canada, if you're born in the first 3 months of the year, 85% chance that you can play that you'll play junior hockey versus people who are born at the end of the year. Because literally, my son who's born December 26 has friends who were born in January. They're almost a year older than him. Yet we have a chronologically based system. This is Reed's space. I'm going to let him deal with this more. But it's really interesting that it's easy administratively for us to do things by age, but you can see up to a 3 or 4 year span difference between kids who are the same age. Psychologically, biologically, socially, right? Some real differences. So we need to be cognizant of that as we're going along. So the whole idea of this system is to have a proper approach at Active Start, Fundamentals Learn to Train, include different people to get involved in the system, persons with disability as an example, who can get involved through a first involvement or awareness. The high performance part of our system is a very small part of the sports system. It's like this big, but it sucks up all the oxygen, especially pro sport. Pro sport in North America sucks up all the oxygen and the money. The biggest part of the system is Active for Life. How do we get more people active for life? How do we get the 45-year-old mums and dads or whatever engaged in moving in some significant way? Okay, so this is just food for thought. When I'm talking about physical literacy, this is actually near my house in British Columbia. Not a bad place to live, pretty lovely. Physical literacy really is the gateway to active participation. If somebody is more physically literate, their chances of being able to engage and participate is greater. How do we get more people to that point? Okay, how do we get them there? Well, one of the ways is we need to get people working together. In most communities, what happens is that the sectors, recreation, education, sport, health, you generally don't talk to each other. You certainly don't plan together, right? Even schools themselves don't plan between each other. There's nothing that drives that bus for them to do that. Their goals are different. They're based on their own situation. But how do we actually, these are the 4 sectors that actually involve movement in our society. How do we get them to start to plan and plot together? How can we create that opportunity? I'm going to talk more about this tonight at the tonight session around some strategies that we're using there. But if we're going to create a village, everybody needs to be participating in a significant way in the village. And that's what's great about neighborhoods or groups of neighborhoods, is that they actually will do that. They will come together and start to work in that way. One of my colleagues, Dr. Dean Crears from the University of Manitoba, was down at Project Play in Washington, D.C., and he met in 2015 with the American Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy. He was the Surgeon General for the sane president, unlike the one that's today. There's my one shot at Trump today. I'll only do that. It's not about the built environment, necessarily. People need to develop that confidence, that competence. We can build all the turf fields in the world. One of my favorite slides of all time at a presentation was this depiction of a bunch of ragtag young kids playing on some mud with something that looks like a soccer ball. And it was in Brazil. Does Brazil know how to play soccer? They didn't need turf. You know, we've kind of got hung up on our built environment a little bit too much. Now, I'm not talking about we need sidewalks. We absolutely need sidewalks. That makes a difference. Lots of things around that. But do we need to have fancy stuff all the time? We need to be looking at, in parallel to the built environment, the opportunity to create more competency and more confidence for people to move. And then they'll go out and move in anything. That's really what we want at the end of the day. A couple of websites you can focus in on if you like, that have lots of different resources. There's more and more good ones out there. There is more information available on the interweb than there ever has been. Sometimes it's hard to find. But for those of you that work in the after-school space or the early childcare space, this one right here is an Ontario website. It's really good. It has lots of really good stuff on it. Active for Life. How many of you have seen Active for Life's been out there promoting crazy lately? They usually have an ad in the Globe and Mail every Saturday. They're doing some really great work. PHE Canada is the Physical and Health Education Canada group. These are the PE teachers across the country doing some really good stuff. OFIA in Ontario as well. So a little reflection for you. I want you to take these 5 things, reflect on them yourselves. Maybe this afternoon in the panel, I may challenge 1 or 2 of you around this to come up with, an answer to one of these. Is that it's all fine and dandy to go and attend a conference and to drink in some knowledge and stuff like that. What do you do with it? How do you act from that? To me, that is the great opportunity that comes when we do attend these sort of things. I want you to enjoy the day. I want you to thank you for coming, and I want you to be open to learning and trying new things. Thank you very much.